Hello, everyone, and welcome to Class 8 Personal Finance. My name is Garrett, and I am not an investing professional, just a DIY investing enthusiast. This information is for your information and education only. And in today's video, I want to talk about the Thrift Savings Plan. The Thrift Savings Plan is the federal government's version of a 401k. It is not technically a 401k, it's its own thing, but it is really okay. Effectively, there's no difference once you're actually in it. That's the PDF. That's what that looks like. And so it consists of index funds plus a life cycle fund or target date fund and a stable value fund, and it's very highly lauded for the funds that are in it. Now, as it has been anticipated for months, the TSP recently launched a new web interface that involved taking the website down for about a week. And now that the website has relaunched, we're able to see what's in it, and almost nobody likes it. So in this video, let's talk about the Thrift Savings Plan. We're going to talk about what has not changed, and then we're going to talk about what has changed. What's not changed is a lot of good things, and what has changed are not. What have changed are not. Grammar, people. So let's go to this screen, other screen here, and go through these funds. I'm going to skip the L funds for now because those are the target date funds, and we'll get back to them. The first one I want to talk about is the G fund. You can read here that the G fund is invested in short-term U.S. Treasury securities, specially issued to the TSP. So there's no credit risk with the G fund because it's government. The G stands for government, and the government can literally print the money that they owe you if worse comes to worse. Oh, wait, they are printing money. And the interest rate resets monthly. So this is a very non-standard bond fund. Typically, in a bond fund, the two things that influence the return of the bond are credit risk and interest rate risk. There's no credit risk here, and there's actually no interest rate risk, even though it's providing returns equivalent to basically the average yield of all outstanding Treasury notes and bonds that comes out to somewhere between 5 and 10 years typically. And so right now, the G fund rate for this month and for last month is 3%. And that's pretty good. That's on average to probably like a 5-year Treasury bond. I'd have to look up the Treasury yields to be sure on that. So it's acting like a 5 to 10-year Treasury bond, but in terms of swinging up and down, it actually doesn't go down, like at all. You can see the growth of $100 here, and yes, the slope changes. You can see, maybe you can't see because it's just so small, but it's beaten inflation over a longer period of time, and it literally can't go down. And then you can see, oddly enough, at the very end, it goes boop, and it goes a little up based on interest rates coming back up as of late. The G fund is a perfectly good place to put your entire bond allocation if you just want to avoid all of that interest rate risk. So now, hang on. Yeah, okay. So now here's the F fund. The F fund is the standard bond fund within the TSP, other than the G fund. G fund, whether you want to call the G fund a bond fund, is up for debate. I like calling it a bond fund. But the F fund is a bond fund. The F stands for fixed income. Fixed income is a fancy investing term that just means that the payouts of those bonds are fixed. They're already predetermined when those bonds were sold in the first place. So the objective of the F fund is to match this index, Bloomberg US Aggregate Bond Index. So it's bond market index fund. It's not unsimilar to AGG or the Vanguard Bond Market Index Fund. And it's able to go up and down. It's about 60 to about 2/3 treasuries and 1/3 corporate bonds. And so you're taking on, if you remember that credit risk and interest rate risk I was talking about, it has that credit risk from those corporate bonds, and it has the interest rate risk because it's not like the G fund where you have those very short-term securities that have the intermediate term returns. You don't get that free lunch with this one. You're still taking the risk. A lot of folks will have this 100% this as their bond allocation, not in their stock allocation, of course. And so this one will work. For a long time, I was 50-50 in my bonds between the G fund and the F fund. Most recently, I was 100% G fund for my bonds. Either of these are fairly good choices. Now let's talk about the C fund. The C stands for common stock, which I think is a bit of a misnomer because it's not like the other two funds don't have common stock. Common stock means that it's not preferred stock. If you don't know what preferred stock is, don't worry about it. I'm not going down that rabbit hole. The C fund is an S&P 500 index fund. So if you're familiar with that, you know what the C fund is going to be. You can see the top 10 holdings here from Apple all the way down to United Health Group. Almost all of these companies you've probably heard of. These here are the largest 10 stocks in the U.S. The SP 500 is 500 of the largest stocks in the U.S. Not quite the 500 largest, but you can think about it that way, and you'll be fine. That's the C fund. It really should be at the very core of what you're thinking about when it comes to investing in stocks. Then you have the S fund. The S stands for small, and this is in effect all of the stocks in the U.S. other than those in the S&P 500. And it doesn't invest in every single one and has to sample them because it's not feasible for the fund to invest in all of them. It samples them out, and that's fine. And you can see this little thing in the fact sheet that says, as of the end of last year, it made up approximately 19% of the market value of the U.S. stock markets. So in other words, if you wanted to replicate the total U.S. stock market, you could go 81% C fund and 19% S fund. Don't do that. Go 80-20. Keep it simple. 80-20 is like much easier math. And this is going to swing around. I've seen this go 83-17 at one point, and I was trying to be really pedantic about it. Just go 80-20 and call it a day in terms of what you do with the C fund and the S fund alone. Now, you're also going to have this last one here, second to last one, the I fund. The I fund is your international, and it's based on this right here, the MSCI EAFE. That's how we pronounce EAFE. The MSCI EAFE index. Now, this is what we call a developed markets index, and developed markets, particularly in Europe, Australasia, and the Far East. What do we mean by developed markets? We mean that they're not the other classifications that aren't developed. In particular, emerging markets. Emerging markets is the other major classification. So developed markets, let me switch my face here. Developed markets are, for example, Japan, Germany, the UK, France, Australia, and then you have emerging markets. The biggest emerging market is China, and then you have Taiwan, India, Brazil, and every other Latin American country with a stock market. Formerly Russia. So the term emerging, at least in the English language, means that they actually have some sort of upward direction or something, right? My hands are emerging from the bottom of the screen, right? But that's not necessarily true. It's really just a name. The UN coined this term in order to encourage people to get more invested in these emerging markets, right? Russia was an emerging market, and now it's not even that. It's a standalone market because if you're not Russian, good luck investing in there, and you probably don't want to anyway. So the I fund became a political hot button back in 2020. In 2017, the board that controls the TSP made the decision that they want to switch the I fund from its current index to one that also has emerging markets in it. So suddenly you're going to have China in the 401k for the United States military. How does that sound politically? not so good. And by 2020, and I think that was the year when the index was supposed to change over, politicians had spoken up enough such that the board felt enough pressure not to do this, and so they voted to delay the transition. So for right now, the I fund is still a developed markets only fund. And oh, by the way, I said Europe, Australasia, Far East. So that excludes developed markets not in Europe, Australasia, or the Far East. And there's one of them. Actually, there's two of them. One of them is the U.S., obviously, but that's not considered international. Really, it should call it foreign, rather than international, because the U.S. is a nation. But you get the idea. The other one is Canada. There is no Canada in the I fund. The other glaring one that's missing is South Korea, because MSCI considers South Korea to be an emerging market, and I really think they should call it developed. There is another index provider out there that considers South Korea to be a developed market, but MSCI is not that. I'll bet there's some political angst with that one as well. Let's go up to the L funds. And I like the L funds quite a lot. By the way, all of these funds are cheap. I'm not listing out every single expense ratio, but the L funds are target date funds. And so you pick the year that is closest to when you are going to retire. I happen to have been born in 1985. I turned 65 in 2050. If this were me, I would be going with the L2050 fund, and it would put me in these allocations. Looks here, 10% G fund, 8% F fund, 41% C fund, 12% S fund, and 29% I fund. I think that's a great portfolio. If you live in the TSP and don't have other accounts involved with potentially different allocations, and you have to use a spreadsheet to kind of mix things up to understand what's going on overall, you could just live in the L fund, and that's going to be a perfectly good portfolio for you. And then it increases your bond allocation over time by the time you retire. When the year of that L fund becomes to be, like in 2025, L 2025 will cease to exist, and you'll get merged. Those folks will get merged into L income, and it's just going to stay like that. They are adjusting these percentages over time, like over the next 10 years. I was just reading something about that. But that's, very aggressively an income portfolio, and you could just live with that in your retirement. And that's really, really good. So L funds are good. Now, you could potentially go more aggressive. You go more conservative by choosing your own allocations. So how exactly would you want to choose these allocations for yourself? So let's do a portfolio build here. And let's see. I already built this out, in fact, but I'm going to show you how I did this math. Let me zoom this out a bit. So you've got these 5 funds here. You have the G fund, F fund, C fund, S fund, and I fund. For this example, I pretended that I'm 30 years old. I'm actually 37. And I went with the age minus 20 rule for the bonds. So 30 minus 20 here is 10%. 10% bonds, 90% stocks. Then I split out the stocks 60-40. 60% of 90% is 54%. 40% of 90% is 36%. Why did I choose 60-40? Well, the U.S. is 60% of the world stock market. Not 60% of all the developed markets, but I figure, hey, try to keep it simple. You'll notice in the TSP, actually, you look at these funds that are about 100% stocks, they went with 65-35. 35% international, 65% U.S. I like 60-40 even so, just because I feel like the U.S. is a little overvalued at present time. So 60-40 would do the trick. It gives you a little more lean to the international. And it's still more than 50% U.S. It's not like you're going all international, something like that. And then I split this out. I'm going to grab a drink of water. All right, I'm back. So I split this out between the C fund and the S fund 70-30. Earlier, I told you in order to replicate the total stock market, you could go 80-20. So you can still do this 80-20, 80% times 54%, etc. I went 70-30 here just because I wanted a little more tilt to small cap. That avoids some of the single stock risk with having such big companies like Apple being, 70% of the S&P 500. So I brought that down a bit. 70-30 is a pretty good allocation here, I think. And so you have a 4-fund portfolio easily constructed. If you wanted to split up the bonds 50-50 between G and F, that would be perfectly sound too, and you would have 5%, 5%, 38, 16, 36. That's a portfolio, and that'll work for the vast, vast majority of 30-year-old investors in the TSP. Now, with the relaunch of the website comes a bigger recent controversy. A great number of folks are having trouble logging in at all. So that seems they tried logging in. They have to reestablish the account basically because the old login credentials don't work. You have to go in with your name and your phone number, and hopefully they recognize your phone number, etc. A lot of these phone numbers aren't being recognized. If the phone number is voice over IP, it's not working. I've seen one issue where the user could not log in, and it may be because his mobile carrier was consumer cellular, which is not one of the big ones, and therefore perhaps the website is treating it like a voice over IP number. And by the way, this is the employer plan for the U.S. military. So good luck establishing a login if you're underway on a ship and the site needs to verify your phone number. And if it's not working for you, then you have to call them, and they're only open during U.S. business hours, and you're in a completely different time zone. I can't overemphasize how much of a fail this is on the part of TSP. It's really disappointing. It's a really big fail for service members who don't have normal access, and that's their thing. Military and federal employees, civilian federal employees are also overseas too. So and then there are issues once you actually are able to log in to the website. There's a lot of polish on this site. And I'm not going to show you the whole site, so I'm not going to reveal my whole account balance and all that. There's a lot of polish and nice font and all that, but the data just isn't well presented. And all the data from prior to the relaunch isn't there. You can't see your old account balances and statements and all that. And also, a lot of folks, including myself, have had the beneficiaries erased from their accounts. Beneficiaries. So, it's going to be an estate planning nightmare for anyone who dies within the next couple months until they realize that the beneficiaries aren't there. And how long is that going to last? It's rough. Now, on the positive side, there are now more flexible tools for rebalancing. Instead of just entering percentages, you can also transfer dollar amounts. That's not going to matter for folks who live in the TSP. For those of us with multiple accounts, that might actually matter. It's a nice feature to have. Now, as a second positive note, it does do a better job presenting the possibility of two-factor authentication. Because as long as you're able to avoid using SMS for your two-factor authentication, you want to avoid SMS/text message because SIM cards can be hacked. Now, the other new big thing about the TSP website relaunch is it includes the availability of what they're calling the mutual fund window. And what this is a means of accessing funds other than GFCS and I, mutual funds that are provided by other companies, where you can put in a portion of your TSP, 25% up to 25%, to go into some mutual funds outside the plan. However, there are some significant limitations to know about. For one, let me bring this up. It says your initial transfer to the mutual fund window must be $10,000 or more, but may not be more than 25% of your total TSP savings, which means you have to have at least $40,000 because in order to have $10,000 and 25%, you need at least $40,000. And it's got this weird note here. You may not invest more than 25% of your total account balance in the mutual fund window at any time, which would seem to indicate that if you have $40,000, you transfer $10,000, and then your mutual fund window fund goes up more than what's in your normal TSP funds, then I don't know, maybe they take out money from your mutual fund window to put back into your normal TSP funds. We just don't know those answers right now. And oh, by the way, good luck calling them. The phone lines are absolutely jammed. That goes back to the negatives of this website relaunch. And there are additional fees. You've got this $55 annual fee, this $95 annual fee. I can do math. That equals $150. And a $28.75 per trade fee. So you don't want to have too many funds in there because you're going to be paying a lot for those individual trades. And you've got this additional $150 on top of whatever fees and expenses from the mutual funds that you choose. So let's do some math here. If you're paying, let's just say, a $150 annual fee and you have the minimum balance of $10,000 in the mutual fund window, you're taking on an extra 1.5% cost for having that $10,000 within the mutual fund window. Now, that does get better if you have larger balances. If you have $50,000 in there, that comes out to 0.3%, which is still kind of a moderately high expense ratio if you're an index investor. And if you invest $100,000 in the mutual fund window, you're paying 0.15%, which might not sound so bad. Now, what's in the mutual fund window? Like, is there anything there worth talking about? Let's talk about the interface that's actually in the mutual fund window here. I don't have it logged in, but I do have a screenshot because I wanted to show you what's going on here. These drawings are from a earlier recording session, so I'm just going to switch colors here to go through these things. This is what the mutual fund window looks like when you go onto the site. So you see this right here, the sustainability rating, sustainability, ESG, environment, community development, gender diversity. I don't care at all about screening mutual funds for their gender diversity. Yeah, maybe I'll do a video on ESG at some point, but I'm just enjoying drawing red across all of this nonsense. Yes. Okay. Morningstar rating. Guess what? That's also nonsense. Why is it nonsense? I can prove it to be nonsense on this screen. So right here, I'm going to zoom this in a little more. That's fine. Fidelity Total Market Index is a great fund. So you've probably heard of Vanguard Total Stock Market Index. And if you go 80% C fund and 20% S fund within your TSP, that replicates total market. So one, you don't even need this anyway. But two, I was talking about Morningstar rating. The Morningstar rating for a total market index is 3 stars for a dirt cheap expense ratio. Why? It's an index fund. Of course it's going to do average. Oh, it's an average fund. Oh, come on. Okay, I don't care about Morningstar ratings. That's why. Oh, by the way, S&P 500 index. Okay, that is the C fund. The C fund isn't maintained by Schwab, but okay, it's an S&P 500 index fund. Why is it here in the first place? It's got a dirt cheap expense ratio. Oh, that's 4 stars. Why is the S&P 500 fund 4 stars, but Fidelity's total market index fund 3 stars? Now, the S&P 500 has outperformed the total market because small caps just haven't done as well over the past 5 to 10 years or so. But, I mean, come on, you're going to downgrade the rating because it was tracking more of the market? It makes no sense to me. I don't care about Morningstar ratings. Yeah. Okay. Rant over. The rest of these, okay, you can sort by category, and Morningstar category actually is a legitimate thing. Fund provider, yeah, you can look up fund providers, but if you don't know in the first place what fund providers you're looking for, I mean, other than Vanguard, I guess, yes, you can like scroll all the way down to Vanguard. Um, there's some from Dimensional Fund Advisors that I like. I have some investments with Dimensional Fund Advisors. There's one from Avantis in there, AVDVX, where I have the ETF for that. So you could say, for example, tilt to small value with the mutual fund window, but really, I see two circumstances where this is going to make sense. And that is one, you're talking about someone with a very significant retirement account balance in the TSP and nowhere else, such as in an IRA. You're, you've been in the military 15 years or something like that. You have a significant account balance in there, and you only have it in the TSP, and that's it. And you want to do some sort of tilt to small value. If you don't know what a tilt to small value is, you really need to understand that before you consider doing it. I happen to do it, but I'm not saying you should do it before really getting educated on that. And then two, so one is you have that significant balance in the TSP nowhere else, such as an IRA, and two, you can't roll that TSP balance into a brokerage account because you're actively employed by the federal government, and therefore you're not eligible to roll it over yet, and you're too young to be able to roll that over while you're still active duty / actively employed. So those two things: one, significant retirement account balance in TSP nowhere else, and two, you can't roll it. Barring those two items, I just don't see much of a use for this mutual fund window. And if you do it, one, you don't want to play around with it too much. You don't want to have more than one or two funds max because of that per trade limit. And it'll be wise either only rebalance once a year, or maybe just don't even bother rebalancing. Just deal with, the fact that it's farther up or farther down within there. Now, one other risk I'm going to add with the mutual fund window is political risk. Earlier, I told you about the iFund and how the board wanted to switch that index from MSCI EFI, the developed markets index, where it has all these countries that are friendly to us, like Japan and Germany and the UK, and add emerging markets like China and, well, Russia at the time, right? Now, nowadays with this mutual fund window, okay, the funds in this mutual fund window do not have the emerging markets screened out. They don't have China screened out. And so, in fact, this kind of gets around that political question that was being raised with that iFund, because now you could go in and you can get an international fund that has China in it. I'll bet, and I should have looked this up, I'll bet you could type China into that search box and find a China fund. Yay, right? So this could be a political hot button issue later on, because there's going to be political objection to U.S. military using an employer account to go in and buy Chinese stocks. And what the TSP board has said is, if politics intervenes, if Congress intervenes and says, hey, you can't do that, no China stocks, and they're not even going to say no emerging market stocks, they're going to say no China. If they do that, the TSP board has said they don't have the resources to have somebody go in and screen out all the China funds and then just take them out of the mutual fund window. They're just going to take it out. They're just going to take out the mutual fund window completely, and so you will have paid all these fees, and you will have set all this up for your portfolio, and then it just might be gone. And then it's not like the money's going to be gone, but everyone who's been in these funds is going to sell them in mass, and I don't know if that's going to potentially impact prices of the securities even. And then everyone's going to have to set all that up again. So for those 2% of 2% max, maybe 1%, for the 1% of TSP participants for whom this is even a good idea in the first place, outside of the political risk of Congress intervening and all that, Then you have the additional political risk that's not even the political risk I usually talk about. Hey, China, just started messing with Jack Ma kind of thing. Political risk. China just invaded Taiwan. Vladimir Putin just lost his mind 5 minutes ago, kind of thing. You have political risk inside the United States Congress, kind of going, hey, stop investing in China. Stop putting U.S. military money in China. So I hate to leave on a sour note like that. Okay, the TSP, in terms of the funds, is a great plan. If you are in the military and you are a federal government employee and you don't have TSP, like you haven't signed up for the payroll deduction or whatnot, you really, really should, because it is a great plan. Just go back to what I had in the portfolios here. Let's pull it up. And that's not it. So if you can learn to do a portfolio like this one for your TSP, that's a really, really good setup. And it's really, really cheap. And it's really, really beneficial. I just wish I could be more positive about everything else that's going on, including the account login. And one more admonishment: if you've already been in the TSP and you have not established the new login since June 1st, let's call it June 1st, May 31st, or whatever it was. If you haven't done that since that point, you need to do it as soon as possible, because you don't want some Yahoo going in and establishing account access for him or herself and not for you. You need to go in there as soon as you can and make sure you establish your own credentials. And if you can't, I bid you the best of luck with waiting on the phone. My name is Garrett O'Hara for Class 8 Personal Finance. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I will see you in the next video.